This is one of the most interesting paintings of the 19th century. It deals with major issues of the era like the impact of the Industrial Revolution, the emergence of political revolutions across Europe, and the changing narratives around gender roles at the time. And it does all this with a personal touch. For the people we see in this painting are not just random people. They represent the painter and his young muse. This painting is called The Awakening Conscience by William Holman Hunt. During the Industrial Revolution, new industries were springing up by the day. Since maximizing production was the prevalent idea at the time, all hands were needed on deck, and that included women. The textile industry, in particular, employed a lot of women. A lot of these women were regarded as problem women since they lacked the passiveness of traditional housewives and could articulate their priorities in a much better manner. This was a big change in European gender norms. The women of the Baroque era, especially those portrayed in Western art, were sophisticated women, often dapped in expensive clothing and luxurious items. The only time women were portrayed as anything but that was in scenes from folklore, history, or literature. This started to change in the 19th century, but it wasn't just because of the Industrial Revolution. For starters, there were multiple revolutions across Europe. The Vienna Uprising, as well as revolutions in various German states, the Italian Revolution, the Hungarian Revolution, and the February Revolution in France all took place within the span of a couple of years. With a consistent threat to the established status quo, art was bound to change. Not only did several artists have revolutionary ideals, but the patrons in major cities were also changing due to political upheavals. Art that had been confined to the elite circles was suddenly left unprotected and open to experimentation, just like the socio-political modules. A new breed of artists was rejecting the closeted, well-defined structures of academic art and became more expensive and romantic. One of the groups that embodied this idea was the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood in England. Founded by William Holman Hunt, amongst others, it was a loose collective that despised the superficial and formulaic approach of Raphael and later artists. And just as they hated rules in art, so they did rules in social life. And that is where we end up with this picture by Holman Hunt, The Awakening Conscience. It shows a well-dressed man and a woman in loose attire. For the 19th century audiences, it would have been evident that this was a fairly sedentary scene, because women wore hats and other accessories when leaving the house. She is not wearing a corset, so this is clearly a woman who had not had to leave the place for some time. What adds to this atmosphere is the lack of sunlight in this scene. It is really a dark, dark scene. The only sunlight we can see is at the right bottom, and the characters hardly seem to register it. The man stands out in this image since his sophisticated clothes hint that he has been out and about, running errands or making acquaintances. It is easy to ascertain the relationship between the two characters when we take a look at the woman's hand. She is wearing 3 rings, but no wedding ring. We know that the gentleman is visiting his mistress in this newly furnished room. At the time, it was common for wealthy men to sponsor lodgings for their muse. If we look around the room, we find that it has all the trappings of a domestic and cultural space. The tapestry beside the woman, the piano, the books on the table. But if we wear the detective hat like the hero of some crime novel, we'll realize that none of these things are of her interest. The reading manuals on the table have not been opened, and the piano is being played by the man. She is quite likely an uneducated woman who cannot play the instruments, but these amenities give the impression of sophistication. It is as if the woman is being molded by the man, so she could get accustomed to these social tools. But why does he care? If they were married, it would have been a different story. However, we need to remember that established orders were being challenged, and marriage was not immune to criticism. The revolutionaries and romantics of the 19th century, especially the poets and artists, were wary of the class-based matchmaking that happened in socialite circles. With that in mind, when we look at this painting, we could see that he is basically imposing his own idea of luxuries onto this naive young woman. One also has to consider that this is a very asymmetrical relationship. The woman has no leverage at all, left to the whims of the man who has seduced her. She could be abandoned at any time, just like the discarded glove on the floor. Moving slightly to the left, we find a cat who festers the bird, further helping us understand the theme of the painting. More clues to the woman's entrapment can be seen around and on the frame. Take a look at the bell at the top, signifying alarm, and the marigold adjacent to it representing sorrow. Then we have to consider the shape of the frame itself, which suspiciously mirrors the figure on the clock that appears trapped in a curved glass. If all that is not enough, we can simply read the inscription at the bottom. As he that taketh away a garment in cold weather, so is he that singeth songs to a heavy heart. The heavy heart is being soothed by Oft in the Stilly Night, a popular Irish tune. It is important to note that psychology was on the rise as a very promising discipline to deal with the issues of the modern world. And in 19th century psychology, music was often discussed as a major trigger. Could it be that the woman is suddenly sprung up by the tune? Could it be that this is the awakening that the painting's title refers to? Slowly getting up from the gentleman's lap, the lady makes her way toward the window. In the mirror behind her, we notice that she is captivated by nature and the world outside. Has she finally recognized how lopsided this relationship is, and now wants to escape into the wilderness outside? The leaves that we see in the mirror could also be a play on the eradication of wilderness from everyday lives in the rapidly changing urbanized world. In reality, it was not uncommon for naive women to be seduced by wealthy men, who would abandon them at any given moment. These women would then be forced out of their residences with no social or practical skills. Having cut ties with their families out of shame, some would even end up severely depressed. What makes this so intriguing is that, through all these ideas, the painting manages to put us in the shoes of an ordinary 19th century person living in London. Within this frame, we are left to our devices to grapple with the social and economic challenges of the day. And to top it all off, there is an intense personal touch to the story. You see, Holman Hunt had fallen in love with a 16-year-old working-class girl from the slums named Annie Miller. He bought a place for her and arranged a landlady to help cater to her basic needs, including studies. She became his muse, and he used her as a model for several works. Like other men who kept young mistresses at the time, he hoped that over time she would fall for him. The two became engaged later on, but it did not pan out as he had expected. What did end up happening was that her popularity as a model skyrocketed in the Pre-Raphaelite circle. In the 1850s, Hunt was preparing to leave for the Holy Land in pursuit of knowledge for his religious works. He knew that he was going to be leaving London and Annie, so he painted The Awakening Conscience in 1853 to grapple with his circumstances. He handed his friend, Frederick George Stephens, an art critic and member of the Brotherhood, a list specifying from whom Annie should or shouldn't sit for as a model. These instructions fell on deaf ears, as Annie sat for many artists he had explicitly warned her about. When he returned in 1858, this point of difference caused a rift between the two, and Hunt broke off the engagement. Miller married later in life and lived to be 90 years of age. Hunt, on the other hand, married twice and lived to 83. If we look at the painting in this renewed light, we might say that this is a premonition of sorts. The woman is rejecting the advances of her lover. The man tries and tries again to gain her attention, whether by wooing her with music or material amenities, but what interests her lies beyond the window, to something other than her. Another one of Hunt's paintings offers key insights into this issue. This one is called The Light of the World, in which Christ can be seen with a lantern, knocking on a closed door surrounded by overgrown weeds. Hunt himself remarked that the door was akin to a closed mind that could not be interested in anything beyond itself. The awakening conscience then becomes a nice counterpart. The woman in the painting is awakened by something beyond herself, something that lies beyond the narrow confines of her well-decorated room. We hope you enjoyed our video on this fascinating painting. Like and subscribe to support the channel. Let us know which paintings you would like us to discuss in the future. That's it for now. See you in the next one.